All right, welcome back. We are MAPD724 in the winter 2020 semester. I don't know why Xcode is working. And at Centennial, and we're week 6. This is 6 weeks into the second semester of advanced iOS, and we're talking about making games with Unity. We've made games so far with UIKit. We've done it with SpriteKit, and now we're doing it with Unity. And again, this is for if you're going to make a popular app. Some of the most popular apps that we can make are games, right? And this is why we're doing this thing. Unity gives us a great, platform that we can make all kinds of games. We've been working on 2D games right now, but you could also always make a 3D game if you wanted as well. Let's get back into this. We're looking at lesson 5 from last week, so we're just continuing with the lesson we did last week, and let's just see what we have. Again, the assumptions are for this video that Unity's been installed, like number 1. 2, you've kind of followed along with last week. If you haven't, that's okay, because I have the GitHub repo online. And what we have so far from last week is this. We actually got a lot done, right? So that's kind of what we got done last week. Pretty good. And that was all 1 week. So why could we get this done so quickly? Well, because it's Unity, right? What was that? It's not Swift. It's not Swift. We're using Unity for this one, right? So this is why we got all this stuff done. And just a review. I just want to review the stuff that we did. So one thing with Unity is, here's the one thing. We haven't built this, by the way, to an iPhone yet. Okay, we're going to do that this week. I'm going to kind of build it to an iPhone, my iPhone, see how it works. Okay. But let's review the things we know. So Unity, again, is a commercial game engine. That's what it is, right? So, which is awesome. And there's a couple of them that are really popular that we talked about. One of them is Unreal, again. So we haven't done Unreal. I'm not going to be able to cover Unreal with you. It'd be awesome. It's a totally different system, and it's very popular these days. But if you're interested in more, you can always look at Unreal, right? And it's Unreal 4. The Unreal Engine is pretty awesome. It's used to make AAA games like Fortnite and a bunch of other games. It's got fantastic support, from the developers, which is awesome, right? Epic Games makes Unreal, and they support it. They have awesome graphics and everything else, so that's another commercial game engine. One thing that Unreal has that's different than Unity is it uses C++ as backend, and instead of prefabs, what they use is something called blueprints. Again, very similar to what they do. Their shader system and their whole shader, their lighting model is very different than Unity's, and it's pretty awesome. One thing to note, though, when you're developing, if you ever develop with Unreal Engine, is that it requires some serious hardware for it to run properly. So even my little Mac here, which is an i7 with 16 gigs of RAM, and I mean, it's a few years old now, it can run Unreal, but what I develop with it, I'm not so sure. It's not fast enough, to be honest, right? So look, even now, my Mac, just displaying the images that this is doing is like the fan is spinning just to do this, right? So it's pretty powerful stuff. So you need a pretty hefty system to make Unreal work. So this is another competing engine. But those are the two. So we got Unity and Unreal. Both do 2D and 3D games. Unreal uses another system for making for 2D, which is very interesting. Okay, so cool. So we're back to this. We're back to this little mail pilot game. One thing we also talked last week is we have each of our game objects in Unity. We have a lot of them having these little scripts attached to them, right? So that's what we talked about. So if I look at scripts, you can see that we have quite a few scripts here that we wrote last week. And for the most part, most of these scripts are connected to each of the game objects that I've put in the hierarchy. Again, just recap, when we put an object in the hierarchy in Unity, and when we press the play button, which is up here, when we press the play button, then what ends up happening is these objects are the ones that are instantiated. So these objects here are instantiated inside of the scene, whenever we have anything in here inside this area right here in the hierarchy. Okay? So what's left to do? Well, we didn't really talk collisions last week at all. So we need to do collision detection this week. Collision detection is the lifeblood of every game, as you know, right? Without collision detection, there is no game. So we have to do that. Let's talk about how to do that. There's several methods we can use. We don't have a user interface, so I don't have any kind of lives or the score labels that we had in our previous thing. And I also don't have multiple scenes. What I want to do, and this is the great thing about Unity, I can have multiple scenes. I can have a start scene, the play scene, and the end scene, and I can have separate scenes for all that stuff. Okay, so I want to do all that this week, and then we'll end it off. But again, I want to talk about the midterm really briefly and your assignment 2. Assignment 2, we're going to move that off till Sunday. So that's going to be the extension. So you'll have until Sunday to get it done, right? So I'll give you a little bit more time. I know you guys have a lot of other stuff going on right now, and you guys are here, which I highly respect, 6:30 to 10:30 every night. It's pretty intense. So I know that it's tough. So we'll move that assignment off a little bit. And then the midterm test next week is all going to be Sprite Kit. So even though we're talking about Unity this week and last week, Sprite Kit is the one that's going to be on your midterm test. So you need to know how to do that, which means you need to finish your assignment 2. If you're working with a partner or partners for assignment 2, make sure that everyone knows what they're doing, because it'll help you do well in the test next week. Okay. Again, I'll be testing very basic things. I'm not going to push you to do things that are outside of the things we've talked about already. Okay, so again, on the docket today, we want to add collision detection. And again, if I zoom in, remember that I can zoom in with my 3-button mouse. I highly recommend having a 3-button mouse when you do any kind of stuff in Unity. I've also got this little layout, so I have a maximum amount of real estate. I can switch between the scene, which is where we edit stuff, and the game view, which is what it would look like on your phone. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is start adding collision detection. All right, so before in Sprite Kit, what do we do for Sprite Kit? Do you remember what we did? You should know what we do, how do we do collision detection in Sprite Kit? And there's one word that I want you to say, right? Yeah, that could be one way to. Math is the answer. We do math, right? When it comes to collision detection in Sprite Kit, there's no math that's necessary here. Okay, so here's how you do collision detection. I select my object. Here's my object. You can see that I've selected my player prefab. By the way, again, as a reminder, these blue objects in the hierarchy are prefabs. The gray objects are not prefabs. Prefabs are things that we can use again in other scenes. So once we define what they are and we set this up, we can just reuse them. We normally put the prefabs in a prefabs folder, and I have 4 of them: cloud, island, ocean, and player, that we can reuse over and over again. Okay, that's what prefabs are. So we want to take our player prefab, and I want to add something called a collider on it, right, which is kind of cool. So if I kind of go here, we can add component, and there's several different kinds of colliders. Let me show you what these are. Okay, so there's one that's called a box collider, and there's also a box collider 2D. When we're doing a 2D game, you want a box collider 2D. That's the component I want to add. Okay, box collider 2D. So what is a box collider 2D? Well, and that's only one. Notice that I have these little boundaries. Like, it creates a little bounding area, right? Notice that if I actually go into this little button here, I can click onto it, this one right here, and I can change the bounding area. So this is one type of collider I can use, right? I can change the bounding area, and I can physically change the bounding box that goes around my object, so it's pretty tight, right? You can see that this is like an AABB. That's what it is, okay? However, we're going to still have the same problems that we normally would have in an AABB. For example, this area here, outside of the, like kind of inside the bounding area, you might get some collision detection that's not accurate. But let's make it work anyway. We'll make basic collisions work, and then we'll change the types of colliders that we can use, from one to the other. Okay, so we got this. By the way, notice we made a change, and there's this little plus right here. It's a really small plus. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's right next to the collider. This means that we've actually modified the prefab, In order for me to accept this collider as part of the prefab, I got to go to Overrides and click on Apply All. And what this does is it adds this new collider component to the prefab. Notice that that plus now is gone. And we'll go do this again. Okay, so I need a collider here. By the way, the type of collider that we have right now is a regular collider, and it's going to be very funny what we're going to see here. Okay, so here's my collider. I can also have a collider for my island. So here's my collider. Let's do the same thing with that. So I go to Island, the Island prefab, Add Component, and I'm going to select the same collider, Box Collider 2D. And if I go to my island for a second, you can see that I can just double click on the island to take me there. You can also press F for frame select inside of the scene. Again, if I press F, you can see that if I'm way out here, if I press F, the F key, it takes me right in there. That's what frame select is. And I can edit my collider by pressing that button again. If I click this button again, I can edit my collider. My collider is actually pretty tight on this one. Maybe the bottom is the only one I really want to modify. All right, top looks pretty good. And the sides are pretty tight. I don't think it's bad if I'm going to use a box collider. Cool, so I've got these two colliders. Okay, how do I detect collision now? So if I run this game, by the way, there's no math, but if I run it, you can see that nothing's happening, right? I mean, there's no collision. Well, we need to set some collision detection algorithms in place, okay? So what I want to do now is in my player controller, now again, it's up to you, but it makes sense that the player is going to collide with the island. The island is not going to collide with the cloud. So there's no island cloud collision. It's just player island collision. So let's try this out. I'm going to go to the player. Now there's going to be some problems, but we're going to talk about this. I'm going to open the prefab for the player. Again, you can do it here or here. If I go to open the prefab, I can see that I have this player controller prefab. Player controller script. If I double click on it, it's going to bring up VS Code or any other editor that you chose to use. You can also use Visual Studio Mac for this one, right? So here's my prefab. Notice what I get is this player controller. And just like last time, I want to go and add a new method, right? So the method that I want to add here is going to be called onCollisionEnter2D. It's actually a special method. So I'm going to go on, and I want to do onCollisionEnter, and there's different ones, there's different options. The one I want is onCollisionEnter2D. Now, unfortunately, I'm kind of zoomed in here, so if I pick one of them, it may not be the right one, right? onCollisionEnter2D is the one I want. So if I go back, I can start typing. So again, it's onCollisionEnter2D. That's the one I want, right? You can see that that comes up, and I get the following. I get this onCollisionEnter2D method, and what I want to do is just a debug.log to see that the collision is actually happening, right? So I want to see if I can detect the collision first. Debug.log, and then I'll say collision, right? Yay, collision. Make sense? So I just want to see, can I detect a collision between two colliders? That's what this thing does. And it says, sent when an incoming collider makes contact with this object's collider. And it says 2D physics only because we're using this onCollisionEnter 2D. If I was doing 3D objects, it'd be onCollisionEnter. That's how they break it down. Okay? So I'm adding this to the player controller script, and I'm going to press save. Okay, let's go back to Unity and try it out and see if I actually get any kind of collision detection. I mean, it'd be bad if I didn't, right? And as you can see, I got nothing. Take a look at that. Nothing. 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 And to test this out, you can always pause the game, right? And you can confirm that there indeed is a collider on each one of these things. So look, here is a collider, right? Here's my collider. And my island has a collider. Here's my collider for my island. Look, there it is. But if I move them close, they don't really register any kind of collision. So why is that? Well, in 2D, there's different ways of doing the collision detection. I can add a rigid body. So a rigid body needs to be added to at least one of the objects in order for me to make this happen. all right, whether it's on the island or on the plane. Well, guess what? We're always going to be colliding with the plane. Not so sure about the island, but definitely the plane should have a rigid body, right? So again, I'm going to click on the plane. I'm just going to stop everything, go to the plane, and I'm going to add a rigid body 2D component. So I'm going to add a new component called rigid body 2D is what I want, rigid body 2D. And my rigid body 2D starts thinking about collision detection. Now, guys, we're going to have some problems with this. Okay, I'm just going to bring it up so you understand how it goes. Okay, one thing is I don't want any gravity because this is going to start making physics happen. So I want to turn my gravity completely off. So I'm going to make my gravity 0. Okay, if I hover over simulated, right, it says, is the body to be simulated? If not, it is effectively hidden from the simulation. We definitely want it on. The body type that you can define is dynamic. If I made it kinematic or static, those are different effects. And we'll talk about it. If you hover over body type, this is the type of rigid body. Okay. So gravity scale 0, angular drag, mass, you can make mass 0 as well if you want. It's not going to allow you to. It'll make it so that's like a very small number, 0.001. Okay. One thing is it starts awake, and we're not going to put any constraints right now on this object. But let's see what happens with this thing when it runs. So now I'm running it with a rigid body, and yay, collision. Now we're getting collisions happening, right? Notice that collisions are happening, but guess what else is happening? I'm actually hitting. Watch. Look at the plane. It's actually moving, right? Notice that? It's like being affected by the collider, and my plane is moving when it hits. And we shouldn't have that happen. The plane shouldn't actually take a collision when it hits. That's not cool. And if you look at the console, you can see that there's a bunch of collisions all over the place. Right? So collision, 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 lots of collisions. And this is going to be an issue for us. So we can definitely put constraints. One of the things you could do is you could say, well, I want to freeze the rotation, as an example, across the z-axis, and I also want to freeze the position on the y-axis. So I don't want it to like slip down. The x-axis is okay if it moves, but those other areas not good. Let's see what that does now. So we can see we have a collision, and it nicely collides only once. Notice I don't have to check the collision detection for more than once. You can see that it's working nicely now. Okay? So it collides. Are you with me? So again, steps. I need a collider. Number 1 step. Number 2 step, I need some kind of rigid body. If I don't have a rigid body, no collision. Okay, those are the 2 things you need. I'm setting the mass to 0. I want to set the mass to 0, or as close to 0 as possible. I want to also set the gravity scale to 0, right? Now, if I make this kinematic instead of dynamic, let's change this to kinematic. Okay, so now I'm moving away from dynamic and I'm going to kinematic. Let's see what the difference is between kinematic and dynamic. Do I still get collision detection? And the answer is no. Kinematic actually removes it from the collision detection. See? Nothing. Yay. That's not what I want, so that's why it can't be kinematic. I can always go static, but static actually is great for platforms. If you're going to make a platformer, static is the way to go. So I need to stay dynamic. So dynamic is one of the things I can do. If I turn simulated off, let's show you what simulated off does. So here's simulated off. Again, you can see effectively that there's no collision detection. So simulated. Okay? I'm just showing you this so that you know how all this works, okay? So you're aware of it. Here's some more info about the collider and so on. Another way you can do this if you want to avoid collision detection is you can use, in your collider, you can choose to make it a trigger. Okay, a trigger collider. So instead of you making a collider that is a physical collider, the way we've been doing it, we can make it so that it's a trigger collider. But that requires a different event handler. All right, so follow me here, guys, for a second. So here's my trigger, right? A trigger collider. so that the plane is a trigger. And I want to go back to my player controller. So there's other options we can do. So instead of using on collision enter 2D, let's comment this out. And you can instead use on trigger enter 2D. So that's another one. On trigger enter 2D. And what this does is it's very similar to on collision enter 2D, but it uses almost like a kinematic or a trigger that fires. So there isn't a physical collision. It's just a you're using the bounding volume just for intersection. So nothing actually happens. There's no physics, like physical response to your collision, which is maybe what we want. We don't want to, constrain our rigid body like the way we have. We want to use this trigger. Okay, so if I go back, I can kind of put in the same thing here. I can go back and go debug.log for this. Here's my debug log, and let's see if we're going to get a response with our trigger collider. Notice we have a trigger collider only here, but the other collider on the island right now is a regular collider. Okay, so this considerations. So going back to this, here's my player controller. I'm looking at my player. I've marked it as a trigger. It's got dynamic as a body, right? And it says simulated is on. Let's see if that does anything. And let's turn off our constraints, because we don't need constraints if it's a trigger. Okay, so that's something I want to do. So I guess if I play it again, I'm looking for collision detection. Do I collide? Yes, everything is good. I still got a collision detection, but now I'm not physically hitting anything. Again, we're going to get one collision at a time. If I clear it, you can see that if I come to this, I'm going to get one collision and then another collision, and we're good to go. And this is the way we want to do it. So we can use collision and on collision enter. However, it seems to me that using on trigger enter is the better way to go. Even though it's still a collider, it's a different kind of collider. It's a trigger collider, which means it's not physically getting a collision response. There's no collision response. It doesn't bounce off the other object. If you want one object to bounce off the other object and have a collision response, like a physics response, then you would use on collision enter 2D, and you would not mark this collider as a trigger. You would unmark this thing. You'd use a different way of doing things. You'd also probably use some kind of gravity and mass in order for it to simulate the collision detection easier. Okay, so that's the first thing. So now we know how to do this. Let's talk about bounding volumes. So we talked about this before, that maybe, this bounding volume as a box, maybe it's not the right shape. As an example. There's other shapes we can use. So let's delete the box collider. Here's my box collider. Now here's the problem. If I delete this box collider, if I remove component, it's going to complain typically. All right, so there's my box collider removed. If I go back to my island, I can do the same thing. Let's remove my box collider, remove component. Here's my box collider. Right, so box collider is gone from both. Let's talk about a different collider. We're going to keep the rigid body though. The player should always have the rigid body on it, right? Because we need that. Let's add another type of collider to the player. So I'm going to go to add component and choose another collider shape. So now let's talk about collider. If I just type in the word collider 2D, you can see that these are all the different collider 2Ds we can have. Capsule, circle, composite, edge collider, polygon collider, and other ones. Polygon Collider is the most expensive computationally because it's the most accurate, okay? But we can probably get away with using something like a circle collider if you really want to. So if I do circle collider, this is equivalent to your, squared radius check that we talked about before. I can click on this little button here, and you can see that I can tighten up the radius on both sides, and I can even kind of, make it a little bit tighter than normal, right? Let's make it just a little bit more here. So it's not totally terrible. Again, you still have some areas here and here. So there's an option for this. I can also use an offset. There's an offset, so I can move it across the y-axis, up and down. So I can kind of center it on the different part. So you can make it a little bit tighter. The wings will be clipped though, so that's definitely an option. Okay? So that's your circle collider. Let's remove that. That's an option, circle collider. Let's try capsule. Capsule is actually really good as well. So if I go to add capsule collider, you can see that it looks at the beginning like a circle, but it actually allows you to control things independently. So you can see that I can go here and I can move the capsule to the left and right. You can also rotate the capsule's position. So the capsule kind of looks like a circle with a line between it. And notice I can do this. Again, when I get to the point where there's going to be a minimum size for it, and if I change the offset, here's my offset on the y-axis, I can kind of carefully put this in the right place, and I can continue to make this as small as I can. This is probably the smallest it goes. So again, it's better, but not optimal. Let's get rid of this. These are other options. I could add a Polygon Collider, and Polygon Collider does something that looks like this. All right, so this is the most accurate, but what it's also doing is it's giving me additional information. For example, it's also including the shadow, which I really don't care about in this case. So I can edit it. And what it allows me to do is give me different control points. So I can kind of say, okay, I want this control point here and here. And I can most accurately create a collision shape, right, for this plane that is way more accurate than what we had before, right? Way, way more accurate. However, at the cost of performance. If we had a lot of objects that look like this, you know, this is definitely something that we would not want to do. Okay, we won't want to do this. By the way, if I need a collider, another little bounding, we just kind of take this little area here, and I can create as many of these areas as I want by just clicking at them, right? So I can get as accurate as I want. Think about this as the closest that you're going to get to a mesh collider. So again, I can make this fairly accurate in terms of the collision shape, which is awesome, right? On the downside, you don't want pixel perfect collision anyway because of performance reasons, but it might be better if you have something that looks like this when it comes to, you know, our ship, because our ship has wings. It's oddly shaped. So this is definitely an option. The other option is, and this might be less computationally expensive than this, is to use multiple colliders. I can have multiple colliders that I have different parts of my object. So one collider that's a box that goes over here, another one that's a box that goes over here. And as long as I have one of those colliders colliding, we're good to go. You can also make it so that it ignores its own collider, right? Because if you have two colliders on top of each other, you're going to get a collision every time because it's going to kind of show the collision. Except we don't want that right now. But this is the simplest way we can do this for the plane. You can see that that is so accurate. It's way better than the other collision shape that we had before. Again, at the cost of performance. But for our little plane, we only have a few objects. It's not going to really impact us that much. All right, so that's that. If I uncheck that, you can see that that is the collision shape that I have, which is way more accurate. Let's go to my island for a second, and if I double-click again, I'll go back to my island. So again, for this one, it's fairly roundish, right? We can probably add a circle collider or a capsule collider, right? If I hit a capsule, you can see even the capsule is pretty good the way it looks right now. You can make it longer or smaller. I can make it more compressed, but looks like it's pretty good. Capsule is a little bit more expensive than a circle. And you know what? You're mostly going to hit down here, so we don't care about this little area up here. That's might be good enough. I'm just showing you different collision shapes here. That's pretty cool. Now we need to talk about the cloud. So the cloud is a different collision shape altogether. I'm going to bring that prefab into the scene just for testing. So I'm going to take the cloud, bring it in. And you can see that the cloud has a weird shape, right? Weird shape. Definitely a box collider would be the wrong shape. And so would a circle collider, right? So what if I tried to use the other collider shapes, not the polygon? Well, what about if I use something like an edge collider? Well, an edge collider is kind of interesting too. All right. So what does it do? It actually is just a line. And what you can do, something similar that we did with the polygon, right? So we can kind of make an edge collider look like this, but it literally is only one surface. And remember that if you don't think you're going to collide from the top, who cares? I'm maybe never going to collide from the top, ever. I'm not going to like come swoop back down this way, right? So this might be good enough as it describes, motion from most of the angles. So probably something that looks like this, as an example, might be accurate enough for the cloud, maybe too accurate even, because I've added these shapes. Notice it's not a closed shape. It's just an edge. So that's another option for collision detection. Okay? So anytime I collide with any area here in this shape, I can have a collision. I can get closer to what I want to do, just like a mesh if I really want to. But if I'm going to go here like with so much detail, again, then I might as well go back to a Polygon Collider. But again, this is another option. So let's remove this one. And let's just, for the simplicity's sake, let's just add a polygon. I'm not going to modify this one. I'm just going to accept what it is. And why? Because there's no shadow, and it's pretty good, and it's pretty accurate. Okay? Computationally expensive, but we have 4 clouds and 1 plane. It's going to be okay. Right? Now, if I had many, many objects, lots and lots of objects, this would be a bad choice. Because you can see that there is much more detail here. The math that's involved in doing these, polygonal shapes to collide between one polygon and another. Whew! That is insane in terms of the math, right? I don't know why, but my machine just turned on for some reason or another. But we don't care about that stuff. We don't care about, that kind of collision shape at all, right? We're not interested. Okay. All right, so let's see if it collides now. So now that I have this, I can do an override. So for the cloud, again, I'm not going to have a cloud in the scene. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to get rid of this cloud. Remember, the clouds are generated by my clouds container, right? So again, I'm just going to go here and go override. I'm adding a Polygon Collider, apply to all, and just delete the cloud, because remember, we already have a prefab of that type. My player, I'm going to override with this kind of stuff that I did, apply to all. My island, I'm going to override with a capsule collider, and we have different shapes on all of them. Let's see if I can detect collision now on all the different objects. So, okay, that's weird. I'm not detecting collision. Oh, wow, look, I'm getting hammered. Look at this. I'm getting hammered with my plane, but there's like no collision detection at all. Whoa, wow, look at that. I'm getting like really rammed with my plane. So why is that? Well, and here's where we go back to the funny stuff that we had before, right? If we go back to the player, my Polygon Collider is not a trigger. I need to make a trigger. This has got to be a trigger. All I have to do is make the plane a trigger collider. Remember? And remember, all we're checking for is on trigger enter. Let's try now. So now we're getting collision detection as normal. Except we don't know who we're colliding with. We don't know any of these objects, but we're colliding with them, okay? Right? We don't have no idea about this. So we can save this. We can save ourselves. One thing we know is that we have our tag. Tag is player. Tag is island. Tag is cloud. Right? We know this. So we want to compare tag between our game objects. This is why I made the tags in the first place, because I knew we were going to get this to this point with our collision detection. All right, so in my player controller then, in my scripts, under player controller, I want to detect which object I'm colliding with. So we're going to use a switch case again. So I'm going to switch case with the other. Other is the object that I'm colliding with. Other dot game object dot compare tag, and whatever the tag is, right? Whatever this string is, right? That's what I'm getting. Compare tag, which is a string. I can look at it, right? I can also look at GameObject.tag, right? So whatever the tag is, right? I can look at that. And what I want to do is I want to say case, and if my tag is equal to player, then do something. If my tag is equal to, well, it's not player. Player is never going to be. Well, island, maybe it might be the thing. Maybe what about cloud? So this cloud or island, right? And let's just make those two things happen. And I'll do 2 little debug logs for there. So I'll say a debug.log, right? We'll say collision with island, right? And we'll just do the same thing, and we'll say collision with cloud, just so we can see that we can detect different kinds of objects to collide with. Okay, so there's cloud and islands. Saving and loading again, and we can see if that works. So again, what I'm hoping is that we're going to see a collision with cloud, cloud islands, island cloud, 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 cloud islands. You can see that that changed now. Yes, we're good to go. We're detecting collision with different objects. Now that we've done this, I can make sounds. So I want to make a sound. When I collide with the island, I'm going to make the yay sound. When I collide with the cloud, I'm going to make the thunder sound. Now, those thunder and yay sounds, we have them in our assets, but we haven't attached them anywhere. So a couple of options. Where would I attach these things? Do I want to attach them to the player? Do I want to attach it to the island or the cloud? Where would I want them? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The player might be the best place because that's what's making all the sounds, right? We can also put them on the game controller. It's really up to you. It's a matter of style. So here's our player, and we have one audio source. We have an engine sound for the audio source, right? But I have other audio sources I can add in. I can add an audio source, not just for the engine sound, because this engine sound plays nonstop, but I can add two more audio sources. I can add an audio source from the cloud, from the yay sound, and an audio source from the thunder sound, and then change the script so it receives those two audio sources. Let's do that. So again, in my player controller, I can make in my script two more objects I want. So I want a public audio source, which I'm going to call the yay sound. Okay. And I want another public audio source that I want the thunder sound. So those are the two sounds I want, keeping it simple. I could make this different. I've done it different in different videos before. But I need two of these audio sources. Audio source is just a place where I'm going to make a reference. But my player doesn't have more than one audio source, so I can add it in. I can say add component, audio source, just like we remember, a component-based kind of system. One thing that this will not allow me to do typically is move it up, but let's see if we can move it up. So it says no, open prefab. I'm going to do this. I'm going to open the prefab, and I modify it, and then I'll save the prefab after. Okay, so again, if I go back, you can see that the player itself has an extra audio source, and I'll add another one, and then we'll move them. Okay, add audio source. So there's two audio sources. Audio sources have a couple of options. One of them is audio clip. Again, I want to uncheck the ones, so it's not going to play the audio source on awake. It's only going to play it when I want to as an impulse sound. So I'm going to go to my audio, and you can see I have different sounds here. I'm just going to pull in one sound for the thunder sound and one sound for the yay sound. So here's my yay sound, yay. And then my audio source for my thunder sound, yay. No problem, I got both of them. And then I'll update it. I'll override those. I'll add those two audio sources in there, and then I'll move them. So if I say move this up, it'll ask me to open the prefab, which I will. And then I can just move these up in the prefab. So move up so that they're closer to the other audio sources, just from an organizational perspective. There we are. And I'll do the same thing with this one. I can move up the prefab, the component on the prefab, so it makes more sense. Move up. There's the three audio sources now, and I have this, and notice that there is a couple of spaces that you need here. The camera has nothing, no camera, and I don't have a yay sound or a thunder sound. This is important. And what I want to do is I'm going to grab this audio source right from here and drag and drop the audio source itself into here, like so. So I just dragged and dropped these audio sources from here to here. Definitely not the best way to do it, but it totally works. And if I do this and I press override and I want to just apply all, I can do this. Now I've updated my prefab. I've got my three audio sources now, right? I got this audio source here, which is the engine sound. I'm not touching that one. And then I got two more, the yay sound and the thunder sound. And the reason why it doesn't like the component order being messed with is because it's an important thing for each component. Okay, cool. So we've got our audio sources. Let's play them, right? So the way you do that is in the source code, you go down here and you say that, okay, well, I want to play the thunder sound, right? So notice the island, I want to play the yay sound. I want to say that yay sound dot play, right, which is this one. I want to play this one. So every time I hit the island, I'm going to play the yay sound. Every time I'm going to hit the cloud, I'm going to play the thunder sound. Right, there we go. And it's as simple as that. I mean, it's really simple to put things together, right? So if I run this thing now, then every time I hit one or the other, I get these different sounds. Right? It's all working at a much faster development rate than doing it in SpriteKit. Like we're talking like beat, beat, beat. I've added collision detection. I've got sound going. Now I'm going to add a UI. So why is it like this? Because Unity's made it super simple to create games. And by the way, once I made it here, I can put it on iOS, Android, tablet, Xbox, if I want to, PS5, Switch, whatever. It'll go on every platform when I make my game. And this is kind of some way that we do it. Now here, all we care about is mobile games, but let's get back. So I don't need these collision detection anymore. I know this is working. So we can get rid of some of these logs. Here we go. So play sound and yay sound. Okay, let's put this up on GitHub now. I think we've got a good enough base. We've kind of done stuff. You guys can follow along here if I do this. Because I'm using Visual Studio Code, you might be tempted to go to GitHub and kind of make all these changes. However, it's highly unrecommended to put this up on GitHub while Unity is running. Unity also has these meta tags that it uses to kind of detect what's being run. So when Unity is up and running, do not put it up on GitHub. All right, this would be very bad. Close Unity, save the scene first of all, save the project. And once you're done saving the scene in the project, close Unity down, open up your command prompt, or you can even use Visual Studio Code if you want. Notice that there's less to change now. Here's the objects that have changed. These are the prefabs. And I can press Control backtick. Here we are. I'm in the project for VS Code. And I can just use VS Code's little terminal window by Control backtick to just do git. How about undo that? How about doing it here? Git add dot git commit -m, and then what we did, we added collision detection, really is what we did. Okay, and then git push, which pushes everything up to the repo. Pretty simple stuff. It's done. Now it's up on GitHub for you. Okay, good workflow. We got Git and in Unity. We've been using Visual Studio Code. We have our Git provider built into Unity, to Visual Studio Code. Lots of stuff we can do here. Let's bring back Unity again. So I'm going to bring back Unity Hub. I'm going to go back into lesson 5 and keep continuing to go. So got collision detection done. I got sounds done. Now I want some kind of scoreboard, and then we need a couple scenes. All right? And then we're going to deploy Typhoon. All right, so here's our island, here's our player, and you notice there's no clouds. I want a scoreboard now. So whenever time I make a sound, I want to notify my scoreboard that things are good. I've got something going on. First, let's make a scoreboard. So what I can do is I can add text here inside of the hierarchy. They've got great text tools, UI tools. Again, I can right-click, and I can go to UI, and I can say I want text. One thing that happens with Unity is it does text kind of weird. It creates text in another funny window, like way up here, okay? Which is kind of wacky, right? You don't have to accept this as a way of doing things. It kind of abstracts the text so you can do all your UI separately from your actual window. Problem is, visualization is tough. Right, so notice that you can't see the text. If I turn this text into something I can see, right, let's say, for example, the text itself is inside of a canvas element. And if I go to text itself, I can call this score. Here's my score. But we can't see it because it's black. I want to make it kind of yellow. You can change the color, no problem, of the score by make from black to like a yellow color. There's yellow. And if I want to be really accurate, I can just say 255. There we go, 255. My yellow color. It's my text. I can make it way bigger. I think probably something like at least 30 might be good. And again, what you can do with text is it has a height of 30. Let's make it a height of 40 so we can see the score. We can make the text wider. And let's see what that looks like in the game. It's kind of like right there. So it looks big here, but really it's like this big. Okay? It's kind of hard to visualize this. So the canvas is actually doing something called screen space overlay, right? Screen space overlay. And we don't want to use screen space overlay. We want to do camera, screen space camera. So if I go screen space camera instead, we got to specify what the camera is, which I can just drag and drop from the scene like this. And then, well, it's a beautiful thing. The canvas becomes something that is aligned with the game. So this is the game. You can't see it. The canvas actually is much smaller than normal. Here's my screen size. This is the actual size of my game. Notice here's my game. Here's the game. So it actually aligns with the size of the viewport. So now the canvas and the viewport, same size. One thing to note is the order and layer becomes an issue. We want order and layer like way up, like something like 10. You can see now that as I go closer, I can see my score, which is an element. It should be definitely bigger than this and somewhere at the top. So let's make it even bigger than what we did. Instead of 40, let's make it something like 60. 60 points. So 60. Maybe more than that, 70. That's better. We can actually see that now. It's going to be somewhere at the top here. Maybe 70 is too big. We're going to see in a second. Okay, score. Again, we're just visualizing what we have. So there's my player, and here's my score at the top. You can see what it's going to look like if I visualize. Now, if you can't see this, take a look how we can see it here, but not in game. And if I just kind of run this thing, I think it's important to visualize what it looks like. Right? You don't see the score at all, even though we see it here. Okay, just to note this, just so you can see it, like that's a thing, right? Remember what's really happening. What's really happening is something that looks like this. So if I look at the canvas element and I focus in on it, it's way over here, right? Canvas, way over here. And this is where this is. This is on top of the camera, and you're seeing nothing, right? You see that that's the case, right? I'm just showing you this stuff so you understand, right? So we've tried to make this. If I make it pixel perfect, that just sets it up a little differently. Just to notice, so this is the actual canvas itself. The canvas scalar is a constant of 1. Reference pixels per unit is 100, just like any other object we have in there. So these are all, kind of settings. If I put this back to 0 for a second, just put it back to 0, and let's see, do we see it? If you don't see it in the game, here in the game screen, then we won't see it here. Okay, so this is the canvas. By the way, I can move it closer, but when I try this way and this way, it's locked to the camera. Wherever the camera is, which is right now at -10, right? Then the camera frustum, here's the actual the actual thing that it's seeing, but my camera's way back here. That's where it is, -10. If I move this to 0, again, what you're going to see is black. If I go to -1, you're going to see the object, right? But again, no UI. -10, it just moves it further back so you can see it, further in. And we can go further in, like -20 if you want. It doesn't really matter where you go after that. It's not going to see the canvas anyway. Okay, but it's way, way over here. This is my camera. You can see where the camera is, way over here. And then, well, this is way over here. Why is that? Because of what we did. So if I go back to the canvas is outside of the frustum. Here's where the frustum ends, right here, right? The frustum is how far the camera can see. So if I want to move the frustum out, I can move this something like 100, right? And maybe that's not even good enough. Let's make it 200 so we can actually see the thing. There we go. So it's firing through the frustum. There we go. Okay, it's -10. So we're there. And now do we see the thing in the game? So even though we're firing through the frustum, I don't see the object because we're making it screen space camera and it's 2D, right? Again, you can't see it here. It's not going to appear. Let's make sure that the canvas element itself is the right depth. Border and layer should be like 10. Do I see it in the game now? Yay, we do. We're good to go. So we see the score, which means we can see the score. Okay. The reason why I want to make screen space overlays so we can control what the screen looks like, just like we would in iOS, if I were doing this in Swift, as an example. We also want to test the score so that it is larger. So again, 9999. You can see that the score is not going to show what that is. I can make it so that the score shows the width, 9999. And I definitely want to put the score on the right side. So I want to put something on the right side of the screen here, like we did in our build. I can also duplicate this. So text, this could be the score label. Let's just name it score label. Here's my score label. I want to make another one. I want to make a duplicate of this one. So Command D to duplicate. And we'll call this the lives label. Here's my lives label. And again, I'll pull that across on the other side. Again, I'm just roughing it. I'm just putting it up right now so I can see it. Okay. Lives label doesn't say lives. It says score. Let's change that. So we'll say lives. And then we'll say something like 99. So we know how big that space is. Let's see what it looks like. So pretty good. And then we can actually look at the numbers. So right now, from a Y perspective, it's 817 and -208. And this is 817 and 226. Okay. One thing we can do is for this one, I can make it right aligned. So it's kind of on the right hand side here. Although then it'll bounce around when the score happens. I don't want that to happen. Okay, so that's one. The other thing that we can also do is make sure that inside the direct transform, I can align it to different parts. So I want to make it relative to the top right of the screen. This will make it so that other devices will have this be relative to the top right of the screen. So this is what I want there. And the same thing goes with this one. So I want to make it to the top left of the screen. So this one is linked to this top left, and this one is linked to the top right, which means if I have a different device with a different size, it'll still link it to the top left and top right of the area. Okay, so score and lives. Okay, let's see how that looks. Looks pretty good. We don't have our font, the font we want of our choice. Let's put the font in place and see what that looks like now. So Arial is the font we're using. We want to change our font to Doc51. We can just drag and drop. And the same thing goes with our live label, Doc51. Again, if you don't like the font, Doc51, you can always use some other font. It makes it a little bit more squishy, so we might want to add some additional size there. For this one, lives label looks pretty good, but score label, I was a little bit afraid. Again, let's make sure the position is important. The position should be the same from the top relative to the top. It should be here is -79. Should be the same, -79, the same number from the top. Okay, so that it's on the same level. All right, so that's looking pretty good now. Score and lives, we've got some test data in there. If I run it, we should see it work. Good to go, right? Except it's not doing anything. So now we have collision detection, and what we want to do with the score is we want to update the score somehow, but we need references to this thing. I need to be able to say, hey, score, update. When I update my score, right, I want to keep track of my score somehow, so there's an actual number for the score like we did with our iOS app, and I want to update the score label as well. So A couple things we can do. We can have a scoreboard, or in our game controller, here's our game controller. We have, it controls the clouds, so we do that. Here's our game controller. But we can also control the score and the lives. We can actually update the score and the lives. When we get a collision, we can send a message to the game controller to say, hey, set the score, set the lives to something. That's what we can do. And that's what I want to do. But I need a reference right now. In order for me to touch these things up here, I need a reference to them from my game controller. So let's do that. Let's add another script, or modify the script, the game controller script. Here it is. And right now I have my cloud and my cloud container. You know what? Remember what I can do is I can add a little header. So I can add a little square bracket that says header. And in my header I can say, you know, cloud configuration. Right? That's my header. You can see now what happens is when I add a cloud configuration, it modifies what my script looks like here in the inspector. So it says cloud configuration. It's kind of a section now. That's what this does. I want another section down here called scoreboard down in here. So again, I want to make another scoreboard. So I want to say, so header. We'll call this scoreboard. And under the scoreboard, we'll have a couple of public objects. One public object we'll have is going to be a type of text. We need to, in order for us to get text, we need to use a new using statement. So I'm going to say using Unity Engine .ui, and use Unity UI. It does exist. It just doesn't like it when I do this. What I want to do is in the Unity Engine put in public, and I want to do a text object, a text. And my public text object is going to be the lives label, right? And I have another public text object that's going to be the score label. Now it's giving me some weird errors, but we're going to get back to this in a second. It usually resolves, but Unity Engine UI is what I want, right? UI gives me that. Okay, so let's see if it actually works anyway. There it is. Lives label and score label. Oh, the clouds are down here. I put that in the wrong place. Let's make sure the cloud configuration is not in the scoreboard. These clouds should actually be, the scoreboard should actually be lower than the clouds. We'll put that here, and we'll put this up here. And now we can reorganize some of this the way it looks. There we go. So clouds are here. We have our little scoreboard here with the lives label and our score label. In order for me to use the lives label and score label, I got to pull it in by going into my canvas and just drag and dropping it. So lives label goes here, and then score label goes here. Okay? Pretty simple. I got references now by pulling them in. They are type text, Unity Engine text. Sometimes it's funny, you know, Visual Studio Code doesn't detect certain classes, but this is totally cool. I know that it's Unity Engine UI. This is where I kind of like take offense. You know, I'm like, hey, come on, Visual Studio Code, can't you learn to do everything? And it's a great editor. It's come leaps and bounds, but sometimes we get this stuff where we don't see this, the code hinting. It looks like an error, but it's not. All right, so lives label and score label is there, but I want, the great thing is this game controller, I want it to be system serializable. So I'm going to say that, I want to say that the game controller itself is system.serializable. And what this does is it makes it available to other parts of my project. Now I want two functions. One of them is going to be set lives label and set score label to something, right? I could do that. I also want some private members that keep track of lives and score. Let's put that in the private area. So here I'm going to say that here's private. I'm going to say that there is an object that is a string, right? By the way, actually, you can make them what they are, which is an integer. So objects that are integers. And we'll call these lives. And private int, we'll say that this is score, right? So score and lives. And I want to have public properties, get score and get lives, and set score and set lives, right? So it's full properties. So remember how we do properties in C++, there isn't such a thing. You have to use get score and set score. Here, you don't have to do that. You can actually type the word prop. And I want, if I say prop full, right, it'll actually do this. Actually do everything for me, right? So I don't even have to do this stuff up here. Let's just fix that in a second. So let's get rid of this for a second. And I can do prop full. This is a new thing. So prop full, which creates my property for me and does getter and setter. And we'll say that this property is integer. The property name is underscore lives. My property name is going to be called lives, capital L, right? And it does my getter and setter for me nicely. Let's do the next one. So again, prop full. And again, as an integer, it's going to be called underscore score. And it's going to be called score. So this is not visible on the public, even though it's a public property, it's not visible. And why is this giving me problems? I did the exact same thing here. Maybe I should put these up there just to be organized. So private area here, here's lives, and here's score.
Remove that after the score name. Semicolon. After the score.
This?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's a mistake. Yeah. Yep. All right, so that's cool. So we got this, and that takes care of my properties. We can just say this. These are private instance variables. We can just actually comment. So private instance members. And these are public properties, but they're public properties to the class, not to the inspector, unfortunately. It doesn't matter what you do. You can't show these things. So public properties. So I wish that they could show these public properties, but they can't. Notice if I go back to the inspector now, you don't see them. So if I go to like my game controller and I look at them, I just see this. I don't see the other stuff. Even if I system serialize or serialize field, it won't show them. But I don't need them to be shown anyway. Lives and score, they're for me, right? I could show lives and score, the actual values, if I really want to. Right, so this lives and score value, I could totally show this off by serializing the fields, right? And I may need to do that temporarily just for testing. But what I want to do is use this lives and score to do a couple things. When I set my lives to whatever the value is, I also want to set up the scoreboard. So this is what I can do. This is why the power of having getters and setters. I set my lives value, whatever the value is I set to my lives, but I also update my scoreboard. So I can say that the lives label dot text, that's equal to underscore lives dot toString. So I can change that. But this is not enough. It's got to be a string that looks like this. So it's going to say lives plus, right? And I'm just going to take whatever my lives are, and when I update my lives property, so too does the lives label update at the same time. And I can do the same thing with my other piece of scoreboard, right? Again, I'm just going to put this on different lines so you can see it. I'm just going to say that score label dot text is equal to score plus underscore score dot toString, which is going to convert everything to a string, and it's where nice to go. So now what I want to do is when I have a collision, I want to signal my game controller that I have a collision by setting the score through the property. And when I do that, then the live label and the score label will automatically update in the UI, right? So I don't have to watch. Okay, so this is this part. I'll put this up on GitHub in a few minutes. So now inside the player controller, right, what I'm hoping is that when I go in here and I look at my cloud and island, I want to access the game controller. Notice that game controller, I don't have a reference to game controller here, all right? And I can't just say game controller like capital G. I can't do like, hey, game controller, let us go to, you know, set the lives. I can't do that because lives is not a static object. I'd have to instantiate a type of game controller. So I don't want to do this. I want to get a reference to the game controller, and I'm going to do that up here. So in the public area, I have these sounds. Let's make a header for sounds. These are the sound effects. So I'm going to guess again, square brackets. I can put a header. So I say header, and these are sound effects. And up here, I have reference to my camera, but I'm also going to get access to my game controller. We're going to call this game controller, right? In my game controller, what I want to do is I want to say, hey, game controller, I know that you, lowercase game controller, I want to set my lives to whatever I want to do. I want to set it to whatever the lives is, right, -1. So lives minus equal to 1, which is going to reduce the lives, whatever it is, by 1. Okay? Actually, it should be when I hit the cloud. That should happen. Oops. I want to put that here. And then when I hit game controller, when I hit an island, I want my score to be plus equal to 100. Okay, so that's what I want that to be. I want to make it 100. In order for me to do this, I need access to my game controller, which is going to happen in the hierarchy. So again, going back to here, I can go to my player controller. So player, here's my player controller. It's going to update in a second. It's going to show me the thunder sound and player sound. Just got to click away and click back. And why is it doing this? I got an error. It says text is not accessible. Oh, that's here. Test is not accessible of the live label. Is live label dot, is it set text? Dot set. Sorry, I'm not getting code hinting, so I think it's lowercase text, but let's see. I can look it up. Because of this error, I'm getting this UI error, and there's no reason why I should get this error. It's just it's a bug in Visual Studio Code. It doesn't detect the class. Let's see if that's a problem still. Nope, now we're good. So it's lowercase t for text. Okay, cool. So you can see that this is camera. Here's my game controller. I need a reference to game controller. I'm just going to drag and drop it from the hierarchy like this. Here's game controller reference. There's game controller. And if I press play, then we should see the effects that I want. So it updates. But we get some weird wacky lives. Why? Because I never set the defaults for in my game controller of these values. I never set the defaults. And we can do that when it starts. On start, my game controller now can set the lives and score labels. I can set, you know, lives is equal to 5 and score is equal to 0, right? And if I do that right away, then when I run it, you're going to see this. I can start off with lives of 5 and score of 0, right? And we're almost dead. But I'm pretty good with score. Okay, cool. So you can see that the score works now. Okay, cool. So we've got our scoreboard. Let's put this up on GitHub. Any questions so far? I know I'm going quick, but I'm just showing you the building blocks. So when you watch this thing, and again, you can watch this video later if you need to, especially if you're going to do your assignment 3, right? let's see how this works. So again, I'm going to close down Unity. First, I'm going to save the scene. Then I'm going to save the project. Then I'm going to close Unity down. And when I do that, I'm going to go right back into VS Code, Control backtick, which will bring up my little terminal window. And I can just say git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say added scoreboard git push. Okay, and then you should have everything up online, right? Done. So that's all up online now, up on GitHub. Okay, let's launch Unity again. Let's go back and finish it off. So you can see how fast we've done things. Last week we did pretty much everything except for the score. Now we have the score. Okay, but here's what I want to do now. When my score goes down to less than 1, I want to go to the end scene, and the end scene is going to say game over, right? I also want a button in the end scene, so when I go game over, I want to come back. And I also want a start scene to start this game off. I don't want to start here. First we'll do the end scene, and then I'll do the start scene. How does it work? Well, I need an end scene first. Let's make an end scene. To make it simple, and I highly recommend you guys do this when you make a scene, copy the existing scene, whatever it is, copy it to a new scene. So again, I'm going to go to scenes. I have main. I'm going to change this scene from main. I'm going to right click and go to duplicate. So Command D duplicates the scene. I'm going to make this scene, we're going to call it end. Here's my end scene. And let's just get there. So I'm going to go to my end scene for a second. Now we're going to start removing stuff. Okay, so here's my end scene. It's easier to destroy than to build, like we've talked about before, right? So I don't need all this stuff. I don't need my lives label and score label. However, I do need maybe a game over label or some kind of other things. All right, so let's go to my canvas. I'm going to duplicate my score label for a second. So Command D, move this up in my canvas. We're going to call this the game over label. We're going to make this much bigger. We're going to say it's game over. Game over. And we're going to bring this down. Somewhere in the middle. And again, if you want it exactly in the middle, you can use this little tool right here, this transform. I can just go to the middle. And if I click on option, I can make it exactly go to the middle. It'll snap to the middle, right? Option will pull up some additional features. Right to the middle. I don't care about my player in my last scene. My player won't exist in my final scene, so I'll just get rid of him. So no player, no island, no clouds container. I don't need clouds. My game controller will not have. I won't even have a game controller right now. I'll get rid of it, or I will remove the script. The script will not be. The game controller script won't be here anymore. I will make another one. So there's no, because remember, game controller is not a prefab. And I'll get rid of my score label and my lives label for now. I'll make my game over scene have a bigger label. So instead of 70, we'll make it something much bigger. I don't know, something like, 100. Let's make it 100 big, maybe more. 150. And we'll make this 150. Like 100. That's too big. Let's do this. I'm going to click on this thing. And we'll just edit the size. No, not that. I'm just going to go to a bigger size here. So instead of 150 on the height, the width is something I want to modify. I want to make this width much bigger so I can see what the game over label is going to be. I'm just going to make it so it's the size of my screen. So it takes up my whole screen. And I'm going to make it centered and centered. So it's going to be like the exact center of the screen now. Game over. If I run this scene now the way it is, shouldn't have an error because nothing going on. You just should do this. Game over. Yeah? So it's going to look like. Cool. if you want to make game over even bigger and you think that's not big enough, it's right now it's at 100. Let's make it 120. Maybe even bigger. That's pretty good actually. 120 is good. So 120 is what it's going to be, and I want a button down here. So when I press that button, I want to be able to go back to the play scene again, the main scene. All right. So let's add a button. So again, under my textures, I have a next button and a back button. What I want is a restart button. I got a start button, but I need a restart button, right? So again, what I want to do is go back. I want to go to the operating system itself now and do one more button. Let's go to the operating system. So again, this is on the desktop, under folders, under Unity projects. That's where I have everything. And we have this less than 5. Inside of assets, I have under textures, I have this object called back button or restart. Let's just take the start button and make a duplicate of it. So I want to duplicate that. I want to call this button the restart button. There we go. And I want to double click on here into the restart button, and then hopefully I want to change this restart button to something that's more reasonable. So again, I'm going to open this up in whatever program you want to modify. I'm going to modify it here in Illustrator. Hopefully that I can do it in Illustrator. There might be other programs that we can use too. Unfortunately, Fireworks and other smaller programs don't work anymore in the latest version of macOS because of Catalina. So again, I'm going to zoom in here. What I want to do is this button, one thing I can't do is change the text so easily, but I'm going to modify the text everywhere anyway, and I can simply put another box that goes on top of this one, and I'll make it the same color as the background. So I want to make it so that it is the fill of the box is the same color as this background. So let's just zoom it in here. Sorry, just using my controls. All right, and I want to use the eyedropper tool. There it is. Just so that it looks the same. I'm not going to have a border. There seems to be some kind of border around here, which is kind of interesting that it's giving me a border. But I don't want a border, and I'm wondering if it's just a selection border. Yeah, that's pretty good. So that kind of covers it up. I'm hiding it. I'm hiding the text. That's okay, because I can put my own text in there. So I'll put that on top, and we'll call this text restart. So restart. I'll change the color of the text to yellow. So again, we're just doing a little bit more, some modifications here. So I want the yellow to be yellow, yellow. And I can choose RGB. This is actually RGB yellow. Nice and nice. So that's restart. I can also change the text. Again, this is using Illustrator. You can use whatever tool you like to use for this. So let's bring up the character panel. And we're going to just choose, do I have it? I think I have. Oh. Doc 51. And I'm just going to go to the make it centered, and I'll make it centered, and I'll make it bigger. So we'll say it so that it is, where's my character panel? Let's open that up and make it much bigger than this because I think it's too small. Something like that. And again, we'll just center and center it. Make it perfect. Restart. Right, there we go. That's a pretty good button. And hopefully I'll be able to save this as a PNG and see what I get. So I save it. Again, I don't want to save this as AI. I want to save it as, so file, export. Export as a PNG. It's inside of the same folder. It's going to kind of overwrite this one. So export, replace. And we're going to keep it here because I'm going to do the other one. I want to fix the start button in a sec too. Might as well. All right, so let's see what that looks like on Unity. So back to Unity. And I want to take this restart button. Here's my restart button. And I'm going to pull it into the scene. So my scene, right? I want to make a new button. So I want to go new UI button, which kind of does this. But you can choose another image instead of this UI sprite. I can choose whatever I want, like the restart button. And if I only show whatever this is, right, you can see that restart is kind of squishy, right? I can go to the texture. Here's my texture tab for restart button. And what I want is pixels per unit, right? Because it says tight, sprite, single, mesh type. Let's see if that is better. And I just want to change my sprite mode to 1 to 1. That might be too big. Sprite and UI. Bilinear filtering. Pivot is the center. Sprite and UI. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. I go to the sprite editor. You can see that that's pretty good, but it's being squishied. I don't want the squishiness to happen. So how do I fix that again? Yeah. Image type is simple, sliced, tiled, filled. And what about if I change my height? Oh yeah. One thing I want to do is match my height of my button with the height of this thing, so I can just, you know, pull it out. Make it a little bigger. 1.6. Yeah, that's about right. That's pretty small. Let's make it much bigger now. Restart. And again, what I want is for this thing to be in the dead center. So again, I want to click Option and go to the center, and then move it down the center, from the center line down. And then what I want to use is the center as its middle of the button. Let's see how that looks. Not bad. I got this little text there. Each button also has a text element, and I can just remove the text for now. All right, so let's see how that looks. Does it actually work? So I should be able to do this. Button looks like it's working okay. Now, to make it work, I need the button itself is going to be something that I want to program, right? So in my canvas, this canvas element here, I want to make or my game controller, I want to make kind of like a button controller or something like that. And the button controller itself is going to have the ability for me to click the button, all right? You can call this scene controller or whatever, but I need something to control buttons. So let's call this the button controller. Now remember that I could also put it as part of the button itself. So right now there is a button. This is just a button. We can just rename this to restart button. So I know what that is. And I could attach on my restart button itself a script. I could do it that way too. So let's add a new script, new add, and I want to add it here first actually. We'll make a new C# script. We'll call this restart button controller. And we'll attach it to the restart button. Try that again. There it is. So what do I want this thing to do? I want to make a new, I don't care about this update stuff and start. Typically, I don't care about this stuff. What I want is to delete all this. I don't care about any of that stuff. I do want to use Scene Manager. So I want to say that using Unity Engine or Unity Engine dot scene management, I want to use that. And in my public class, I want to say that void on restart button click. And we'll say it's a click like this, so we can identify it as click. On restart button click, I want to use my scene manager dot load scene, and I want to specify the scene is main, which is going to shift me from one scene to the other when I hit this thing. I go back to the main scene. That's what this thing does. Okay, one thing to note also is, here it is. Here's my restart button. So I want to align, my restart button has some additional button scripts. For example, not only does it have this, but it has this on click event that I have to bind. So on the actual UI itself, you need to bind this, the button to a script. So I'm going to go click plus. And in here, I need to bind the button. And I'm just going to drag and drop the button itself in here, which allows me to go to the restart button controller and hit this thing that says, I'm looking for the click event. So string name. Yeah, this is where it's a little funky. Cancel invoke. Do I have to make it public? I think I have to make it public. Sorry. Public. Let's try that again. Yeah, there it is. All right, so that's what it does. So it just basically connects to this, and then when I press the button, it's going to take me to my main scene. Let's try this out right from here, right from my scene. So save the scene, press play, and then it should take me back to the main scene to start. So restart, and there we go. All right, but what I want to do now that I have my game over scene is, when I die in my main scene, I want to go to my game over scene. Okay, so I'm going to go to my main. So I'm going to go back to scenes main, and I'm going to go to file build settings. Under build settings right now I only have one scene to build, which is my main scene. If I want to go to other scenes, I need to include them here in my build area, right? So I'm going to drag and drop my end scene inside my build scenes in the build. So I have main and end right now. If I don't do this, I can never switch scenes. Okay? Save. So now what I want to do is, when my game controller tells me that my points are 0, when my lives go below 1, I want to shift to my game over scene. All right? And the way to do this is if I go to my game controller, my script, I want to do the same thing. I want to get the, using Unity Engine dot scene management. Notice that that's okay. I want to do the same thing. I want to have this when my score, when I set the score, and if the score is less than 1, instead of setting the score here, right, I can test for it. I can say that if underscore score, oh sorry, wrong thing, lives. Yeah, that's up here. So if my lives are less than 1, then I want to use the scene manager to load scene the end. So that checks to see if lives are less than. This is exactly the code pretty much that we put in our sprite kit. Okay. All right, so let's run this thing and see if that works. So we'll see if it works. So I have a score. Got some score happening. And then when I die, back to end. And if I click on game over, then we're good to go. Right? Game over. Looks pretty good. Okay, guess what? We have a game over. My start is going to be the exact same as game over right now, except it's going to say start instead of like restart. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to my scenes. I'm going to go to end, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to call this scene start. Just to be preemptive, because I know start is going to need to do what end does, I'm going to go into my file build settings, and I'm going to add start at the beginning. So start is going to be the first scene that starts. So start. Okay, and what I want to do is put it up here. So it goes start, main, and end. That's how it loads under scenes. Now that I have start in the scene, I can go from start. It's going to start at start, go to main, and then go end when I do my build. Okay? Let's fix up start. Because you know what? Main is done, end is done, but start, not done. So it's not going to say game over. It's going to say mail pilot. So again, in my canvas, instead of my game over label, we'll rename this thing as, you know, the start label, or my, I don't know, my welcome label. We'll call this mail pilot. Right? The restart button is going to become the start button. So again, I can just pick we'll rename this button to the start button. I mean, I don't have to. It's just for completeness, really, at the end of the day. Start. I could have kept it a button as well. So start button, and this, I'm going to change my start button graphic. I'm going to reset it. So in Illustrator here, I'm just going to go and change this to start. And what I want to do is I want to center that. There's start. And just to keep it the same file, export. File. No. What happened? File, export as. And I want to export as the start button. And there should be a start button here. There it is. Start button PNG. Export. It's going to ask me if I want to replace. I do. And in my textures, here's my start. I just want to swap the texture from this restart to start. So again, I can go to my, what? Wait. Target graphic. That is not cool at all. Wait. Start button. Let's just go restart start button here like this. Target graphic. Oh no, I'm doing the wrong thing. Here. I'll be okay. Start button. So again, I have my start. That's cool. So that's what's going to start there. Now, I need to change my controller, so it's not going to be this one. So I'm going to just remove my component. And I'm going to make a new script. This is the long way to do it. I could use the same script if I'm clever enough. Create new C# script, and I'll call this the start button. But I told you guys before, I'm of the school that let's make it work. Make it work and then refactor, right? If you can make it work and then refactor after, you're good to go, right, at the end of the day. So here's this. I don't need that stuff. And I need scene manager, so using Unity engine scene management. There we go. And I want to make a public void on start button click event. Oops. And in there, I'm going to say that, hey, scene manager, I want to go to load scene, the main scene. So both go to main. I just hard coded this one. Okay. So now that we've got that in there, my start button controller, I can load it into my start button, make it separate. So here's my start button controller here. And just like I did last time, I want to go into my button scripts, and I want to make my start button itself point to this thing. I'm going to choose my start button controller, which I'm going to use on start button click. So when I use my start button controller, it's going to just use the click event that I just made. Once I've done that, and if I press play, I should have a complete game now. So start, game over, restart. Okay. Cool. Game. That's my first playable. If I was going to do a first playable release, I'm there, and I've done it in 2 weeks. Actually, 2 days, if you think about it. I did it last day and this day. So in 2 days, I have my game ready to go, right? And I did that in like, you know, a matter of hours. It wasn't like all that time we did Sprite Kit and stuff. Okay, so what's the advantage? Now, learnings. What's the advantage of using Unity over Sprite Kit? What's the advantage of using Sprite Kit over Unity? What's the difference? Well, we don't know yet until we do a build. So first, let's drop out of Unity. Let's put this up on GitHub. So again, we're going to go File, Save Scene, File, Save Project. We're going to close out of Unity. I'm going to put this up on GitHub for you guys, right? So again, Control backtick will take me in here. I'll clear the screen. I'll say git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say added start and end scenes, and then git push. Okay, that's it. I've got it up on GitHub, right? And you're ready to go. It's a pretty simple little game as a starter. And let's launch this thing now, and let's go through the process where we need to be today. This is the actual thing that I wanted to do today. The other stuff, we did that already in Sprite Kit. This stuff is the new stuff. So what I really want to do now is deploy. Okay, I want to be able to deploy to my phone. And now, my friends, we come into the crux of things. I want to make a build, right? So whenever you do a build with Unity, again, you go to File, and you go to Build Settings. Build Settings, we come to iOS. This is the platform. And we're going to go to Player Settings. Player Settings, I'm just going to rip this off for a second and bring it kind of, if I can bring it to the front here for a second. Just going to tear it off. There we go. Here's Player Settings. I want to just show you this on the screen here so you can see it. So here's my Player Settings, and I need to keep this open, unfortunately, because it's the way it is. I can make it probably a little bit, let's push it to the side so I can put it for here. So you guys can see it. All right, so, okay, I got Centennial College. I got Mail Pilot. I can see that my resolution, what my resolution is. I can set the resolution. This is all stuff we need to do for mobile games, right? What I want to do is under other settings, this is important. I want to make sure that this has my reverse domain name set up, right? This is good. My version and my build number, this is all the regular stuff. Right now I'm using API compatibility level .NET Standard 2.0, so I'm not using any other things right now. What I want to do is I want to build this thing the way it is. Notice it says iPhone only. I've already configured this stuff last week, right? And its target minimum iOS version is 10. Okay, so that's the minimum it'll run on right now. Okay, let's build it. And the way to build this thing is to go to build and run. Build and run. So if I go build and run, it's going to take me to the assets folder. Right, here's my assets folder, my root actually. I want to make a new folder, and I want to call this folder builds. Okay, this is kind of an important step. Builds. Create. In my builds folder, I want to call this iOS build. Why is that? Because I might have an Android build. I might have a PC build. I might have a Mac build. I might have a bunch of other builds. So this is going to be inside build, iOS build, and click save. Now, here's where it gets hairy. And I mean that. It's going to try and build this out. So it's building the resources. This is actually doing the build so I can put it on my phone. Okay? What it's going to do is actually creating an Xcode project on the background right now, right? Where it's doing all this stuff. Notice I don't have a phone, so it's just building right to my, kind of my my scene. It's going to hopefully build something that's Xcode compatible. Let's take a look. So there's a couple steps. Notice it says run in Xcode. That's what's going to happen. Run in Xcode as release. That's good. Right, it says Unity Hub wants access to control Xcode. I want to say allow, okay. And it means I may have to do this again. Let's see what happens. Deploying to the player. Here's Xcode, it's running in the background. Xcode starts to run. Right? It's going to build, and if everything goes well, it's not going to give me a burnt. It's going to run. Okay. And it says clean succeeded, and it's just building now, just like we normally would in Xcode. So this is really cool, right? Take a look. I have all my assets, and it's converted it to something that works in Xcode, guys. Guys, in Xcode, we have full control. We can do whatever we want in Xcode, right? We can deploy to a device. Notice right now it's going to a generic iOS device, right? As an example, it says build succeeded. Excellent. Now I can suggest another kind of device. There's no device connected to my Mac. Notice it didn't allow me to do it into the simulator, right? We need a device for this to work properly. So let's add a device. Let's see if I can find a little cable for myself. There it is, cable, right? And I'm just going to unplug my mouse to make this work. So I only have one port. I love my Mac. Okay, let's go. And then here's my cable. I'm going to put my iPhone on. It's going to ask me if I trust it and all that stuff. And it may not work the first time because we may have to modify things in the Unity in this part right here. So notice we have this part, which is this. And it says here's my bundle identifier, right? Here's the device and all this lovely stuff. There it is. Okay, but remember all this stuff needs to be fixed up because it needs to do what we normally do, right? So this is the Unity phone. This is what we're doing. And then if I look at target device, here's my phone. It may need to do some kind of indexing for my phone at the beginning, right? And it all depends if my phone is trusted by my Mac. That's a really important thing. Okay. Now you guys can't see my phone, and I'm wondering if I can tether it and you can see it on my Mac. The problem with this is I'll be disconnected from the internet. And luckily, I'm not putting this directly. I'm not broadcasting. So I want to see if you guys can see my phone eventually. Okay, cool. It says build succeeded, right? Or actually it says indexing succeeded. Now I'm going to press this button, right? All right, build failed. Well, this is what happens, right? So this is what we said, right? We said, what's the error now that we're getting? So I'm going to go here, and it's going to say that signing for the iPhone is no good, right? Because we need to sign for this thing, right? That's what I was looking for, because if you don't sign for the phone, the signing identifier is wrong, right? Oh, where could that be? Because if I go back to this, where? Signing and capabilities. Now, team is none. I want to pick Centennial, which should fix my signing, hopefully. And let's run it again. Maybe it'll work this time. Maybe. And I want you to see the difference between what we did before. Remember, I ran it on my phone and ran great, right? Will Unity run on my phone okay? This is the real test. This is where mobile development, that's why you get paid a lot for mobile development. You actually get more from mobile game development than other things. There's lots of mobile development jobs, guys, out there. Tons and tons. I'm going to show you this on Indeed in a few minutes, all right? Because this is a job for you guys. This is something that you guys can do, right? So let's see. So we're doing it, and as soon as it's done running the task, sorry for if you're watching the video later on. Oh yeah, keychain. And let's say always allow. Build succeeded, and installing to my phone. Hopefully one day it's going to work, and we're going to see it play live. All right. And running in Unity. There it is. Look how fast that was. Now, there's things that I have to change, right? One thing is this doesn't do this. I made it on purpose, right? This. If I press the start button, it works, right? I'm not hearing sounds because I have my phone muted. Let's just turn the phone around. And this is kind of an issue, right? The notch. Look at that notch. So I got to fix the notch as well. Maybe. Smaller phone. I don't have a. Do you have a small phone? I don't have a small phone. I have an XR. Right? Yeah, that's the problem. We don't know. I remember this. I didn't make it for a specific phone. I just chose a phone, and I think I chose. I don't know if I chose the XR online. Let me just see what it is. Let's see. Hold on a second. I think I made it with. It's here. I made it with the iPhone XR. That's what I made it for. So yeah, so if you have to make it with a smaller phone, it'll try to adapt. But remember that I haven't done any work on that at all. None. And we have issues. We have issues. One, I think the game over needs to move up. In fact, I think everything needs to move up a little bit. And I need my score. It worked on my build, but it doesn't make sense because of the notch. I didn't take care of the notch at all. And then so that my score is way up here. I can't see it. So that doesn't make any sense. So let's fix the notch and we'll rebuild. Here's the other thing. I can't exit this thing. I got to exit it the same way I exit everything else, right? That's how it goes, right? So let's go into the scenes. And if I go into main, and I want to click lives label, and I want to click the score label and bring them down a little bit, just because I think it needs to be brought down just a touch because of, sorry, let's bring it way down here. Sorry, I have to plug in my mouse somehow. So I'm going to have to unplug my phone for 1 sec. Because I have more control with Unity in mine. And of course, Xcode didn't like that. I was going to say, stop doing it. Okay. So I want to pull this down just a little bit below the notch. So it's going to appear somewhere there. We have to figure that the notch is going to be up here, right? So I think it's probably a good spot. I want to save that as an option. And I'm going to go back to my start. And male pilot starts off pretty low. I think this needs to be brought up a little bit higher up, just for thing. I want to also put the game over in the same spot as well. So we should probably find out where that is. So I'm going to go to rect. And it looks like the Y position is like 231. Let's make it an even number. So let's say around 230 and save it. And I'll do the same thing for the end scene. I think the end scene might be good around that as well. So I'll put that at 230. All right, so now we've made some adjustments. Now, we have Xcode open, right? We have a build, right? I want to rebuild. I can't rebuild when Xcode's open, guys. I'm going to make updates to the project. So I need to close Xcode down. And then I'm going to go back to build and run. File, right, under this, file, build and run. And what this is going to do is going to do the same thing that I did before with all the regular settings again. So here's file, build, and run. It's going to rebuild the project, and it's going to rerun Xcode for me. I may have to redo the signing stuff again, right? And then try and deploy to my phone one more time. And then we should have a workable copy, a workable first draft of a prototype that you can do in a couple of days. That's the idea behind it. So advantage of doing Unity, you build once, deploy everywhere. And I think this is where Unity really shines. What about the advantage of doing SpriteKit? Control. I have a lot of control with SpriteKit. I mean, I can do a lot of things that, from a back-end perspective, that might be slightly different than Unity. But I'll tell you right now, performance-wise, it's C++ on the back end. That's what it's actually doing, and we'll take a look at that in a second when we run Xcode. Okay? Hey, notice what happened. It said build completed with result of succeeded, but yet Xcode didn't run. Well, what happened to Xcode, right? So again, if I look at my folder, if I go out, I now have a builds folder, which is here. And inside my iOS builds, I have my Xcode project as normal. Here's my Xcode project, right? There it is, Unity iPhone Xcode project, right? If I double click on here, it'll bring up Xcode. Here it is. And Crashiola. You like that? That was fantastic. It just crashed on me. And sometimes you get this, so what do? Well, I have to tell you that the easiest thing for you to do is wipe this folder out and start over like this. So in other words, go back out, go to my iOS build, just kill it, because it's going to be regenerated again through Unity, right? So go back to Unity and do a rebuild. So File, Build Settings, and then Build and Run, iOS Build and Builds, Save, and it's going to regenerate this for me. And it's better to do this anyway because I find that for Android and for iOS, sometimes it's just best to wipe out the folder and start again, right? It causes less errors. Okay. One thing we can also do is we can make it for WebGL. So I can make this game for the web right now and put it up online, right? So that's another really cool thing. Sometimes it's difficult to share my app and give it to other developers to take a look at and evaluate, but I can really easily put it up on the web to get them to look at it and give me some opinions. Let's change the signing back to Centennial so I can prepare for this. I'm going to save, right? And I'm going to just do Command B for build. Just want to build it just so it's built. And then I'm going to put it up on the phone. And let's see the changes, if it worked. By the way, while it's building, let's take a look. Let's inspect the project a little bit. Okay, so you can see that I have this new folder called Data. I have images, XC assets. I have a launch image, which is the Unity image, right? With an app icon. I could switch these out if I want. I have my sensors and my processor and all this stuff in here. Where is my game? Right? Because you want to see if your game is available somewhere here. Well, this is where you don't have any control over that, right? Data is really where your game is. It's kind of hidden. Like all this stuff that you have in here, these are all folders that are just Unity specific. So there's nothing that you're going to see here that's part of your game, right? Not in here, right? But this is all the stuff that you need. Notice it's using, if I want to see this stuff, I'm using C++, right? That's what this is, to generate my games. These are all C++ classes, right? That's all this is. So you can see that this is all the stuff that I'm using for my game. Okay. Then it says, if I scroll down, if I open up classes, there's also something called native. And there's a bunch of native stuff that it uses for Unity. But my scripts are not visible because they've been converted. Something that's like in here, right? Where all my scripts have been made so that I can launch my app. So it's not like you can go in here and modify your application too much, right? You don't have that control. So that's a problem. I mean, if you wanted to go and modify stuff, you could modify the build. So if you go to the actual build itself, up here, you could do this work, like we've done already. Okay, okay, let's put it back on the iPhone. So I'm going to plug in my iPhone. Let's see how this works. So here we are, my iPhone's back on. And let's build it to the iPhone. All right, so yes, trust the computer. And sure. Trust it. And I'm going to say Thomas's iPhone. Sure, let's build it. And we're going to see if it builds again on my iPhone. It's going to replace the app that's on my iPhone like normal. And we'll be able to do everything. The only thing that I was concerned about was the notch. I thought the notch wasn't good. And then I'll see if I can show everybody in a second like you suggested. But you can probably use AirPlay for this. Sure, where is it? Sure, there's QuickTime. I personally don't do it this way, but that's okay. Sure.
And then when you're placing this arrow near the red button in the middle, like here, there's an
Yep.
arrow.
Yep.
You just put in the iPhone. There should be Thomas. Yeah, Thomas iPhone.
Yay. And it says lost connection to the debugger. Press OK. There it is. Let's see if I can put this thing on and see what happens, right? So this can I minimize that? Actually, if I just okay, so that's what it looks like. So if I press start, it's not bad, right? So that's where lives are and score. Now you have to imagine there's a notch. I think I still need to bring it up a little bit more compared to what I did before, right? So, but overall, it's not bad in terms of what it does. So it's pretty good. Like, shows me what I did. So one thing I'm actually not hearing is sounds, which is a problem. I'm not sure if it's because my sound is muted or because I'm connected this way, because I'm connected through QuickTime. I don't know. But before I was playing sounds. Yeah. Cool. So kind of a little game that we made, and it looks pretty good, right? Nice and smooth movement. There we go. Now it is showing 0. That's also a glitch. See how I went to like 1, 0, and then it switched over? I shouldn't allow it to switch to 0. I should just, go over to the other side there. So what are your thoughts, guys? Thoughts? Would you use Unity as well? Would you make it through Sprite Kit? What do you recommend? Yeah. And this is the thing. This is the power of Unity. I think it's the great thing about this is that we've got a lot of control, right? And especially for games. I think, making other applications. By the way, Unity is not used just for games, guys. It's used for everything, like all kinds of stuff you wouldn't believe, right? So that was weird. Lost connection. It's like I lost the connection again. Let's try that again. Yeah. So it needs to be still not really great. It still needs to be up just a touch more from where it is. The score, I took it a little bit too far down, and again, I probably took it down maybe half the distance of the way where I put it down. I need to put it back up towards the notch. It's a little bit too low. One more change and then we're done. Okay? Just for completeness. Again, highly recommend you close off Xcode and you go in your operating system, you kill the build. It just prevents errors. Honestly, it does. And then what I want to do is I want to go to main. So let's close this off. I don't need this anymore. So I want to go to main. And this is weird too. Look what happened here. My stuff with Unity. Unity's weird, right? Unity's weird too. Sorry, but it is. Because it's like, whoa, why do I have like black text? You know, I shouldn't have black text. Now here's the one thing. Oh, there we go. Back to normal. Okay, so again, I probably need to move these up just a touch, I think. I think that half of the way up the way I put them, and I'm not measuring. Probably something that looks like this is probably good. Accommodating for the notch. I think that's pretty good now. Let's save it, and then we'll do a final build. Build and run. So there's the workflow, guys. So you make your game in Unity. Then when you're ready to test it, you start testing it with your phone. And guys, the best way to test it is with your phone. If I was to run this thing in the simulator, notice it wasn't even an option, right, to run in the simulator. So it's best to do it with that. Notice it's using everything in C++, and that's why it's so performant. Right, and Unity's really improved over the years. The way Unity wraps up its project, it's way better now in Unity 2019 than it was when I first started using Unity. Like, so better. Before, it was slow. When you made a Unity project for iOS, it was like super slow. Like, you had to make adjustments and do a lot of work. Here, there's not a lot of work to do, truly. I mean, literally, it's just, you're good to go, pretty much out of the box. And that is saving us a lot of time nowadays compared to what we did before. So again, Command B just to build locally. First you build locally, make sure it's working properly. You've got some issues. It says some of this stuff is deprecated. This is like a Unity problem. They're still working on making this better. Okay, let's as soon as we're done this, we're going to launch it on my phone. I just want to make sure I do a full build. It'll make the tasks run faster when I do this. So any questions around Unity and iPhone build for Unity? Guys, that's all I want to show you tonight. I'm not going to keep you guys, right? You guys got a lot of work to do. You guys got stuff to do for your assignment number 2. I can certainly stick around to help you guys with assignment 2 for Sprite Kit. We can use a work session, or I can let you guys go. I'm going to put this up on GitHub after this. But this is the stuff that you need for your assignment 3. So assignment 3, just as a preview. Once you're done finishing assignment 2, you're going to convert it into Unity. You're going to put it up on Unity. All right? And when you do Unity, I want you to do an iPhone build, an actual build on your phone. So we're going to do a build from Unity into your Xcode build, just like what I'm doing here. I want to see it here. I also have phones for people who don't have iPhones, so we can test it on that. So it'll be an extensive build. I'm going to give you guys a couple weeks to get this done while I'm talking about other frameworks in the second half of semester. Okay, so look for the new assignment coming up probably by the end of the week. You'll see the assignment pop up, assignment 3. It'll say, take your Sprite Kit, application and build it in Unity, right? So that's why I've been doing this stuff and recording it, so it'll help you hopefully build everything you need. Unity has a ton of documentation, so even if you don't know how to do something, you can look it up. much better in fact than most other frameworks. So you're pretty good. You're pretty safe in terms of what you can do. Okay, let's try this thing one more time. So again, I'm plugging in my phone. Here's my phone. I may need to trust my computer again. Trust. Excellent. And then let's build it to the phone. And we should be good to go. I got to show you one more thing before I stop recording. How you put stuff up on GitHub. One thing you do not want to put up on GitHub is your build. Guys, don't do it. And that means we have to modify our gitignore file. Otherwise, we're going to have problems. So there's two things you don't put up on GitHub for Unity. Libraries, your library folder, and your builds folder. If you put those up on Unity, it's going to take forever. What was that? You're gonna just what you're gonna do is you're not gonna delete them. You're gonna just put them up on GitHub, and then I can download them from GitHub, and it'll run. No. But what I will do for you guys is I'll get you guys to either record your app, or put it up on a WebGL build, right? So that way you can see what it looks like. So I can just double click and it'll work, right? So I should probably show you that too before we go. So this works great. I'm just gonna stop. Okay, I'm gonna kind of close this up. I'm gonna close Xcode, and I'm gonna save Unity, save this, and then save project, close Unity off. I'm gonna go back to VS Code. And just like before, I'm gonna do some stuff. So first of all, let's take a look at your gitignore file. Your gitignore file, again, under assets, I have a gitignore file I made. It looks like this, library. I need to update my gitignore file so it also includes builds, like this. See that? So builds and library, this gitignore file, this example online that I've already given you, is exactly what you need, because now it's not going to put library or builds up on GitHub. That's why it's so quick, right? If you don't include this gitignore file, your GitHub repo could be like gigs. It's like it can be really big. So don't do that. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say created first builds git push origin master. Okay,